Hello, my name is Tyler Gallas, and before we begin the presentation, I wanted to give you some information about myself and my educational background. I currently hold a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Human Performance and Physical Education. I gained that from Adams State University, and I graduated in December 2010. From then, I've spent 6 years coaching and teaching. I currently coach the varsity wide receivers, and I am the special teams coordinator at Mountain Range High School in Westminster, Colorado. I am also an elementary physical education teacher at Mountain View Elementary School in Broomfield, Colorado. For my culminating research project, I decided to create a wide receiver curriculum guide for wide receiver coaches. The focus of this wide receiver curriculum guide will primarily be for the high school wide receiver coach. Within this curriculum guide, the primary areas of focus will be strength and conditioning, mental preparation, and fundamental drills and skills that a wide receiver needs to attain to be successful at playing the position. Throughout this presentation, I will take you through my project in its entirety. Following the introduction section, we will do a brief review of the literature for all of strength and conditioning, mental preparation, and drills and skills. Within those areas, we will also talk about application and how a wide receiver coach would use these to teach and coach their wide receivers. Following the drills and skills section, procedures will be discussed, and finally in Chapter 6, results and recommendations for future wide receiver coaches. Within this introduction section, we will be covering 4 points. First is the problem or issue that I was addressing, the purpose of this project, what was my interest in this project, and why I chose this project. The problem or issue that I will be addressing in this presentation include novice coaching and learning. Coaches often learn through experiences from other coaches as well as mentorships from head coaches or other support faculty. The research itself really only relates to practice or gameplay situations for a wide receiver, and it doesn't break down mental or physical attributes needed to play the wide receiver specifically. Adapting skills, especially in the high school game, is very important when coaching or teaching the position. Many coaches need to learn the ability to adapt different skills to meet the needs of the diverse growing and learning styles of each athlete. The purpose of this project is to create a curriculum guide to help wide receiver coaches develop physical characteristics within their wide receivers, mental characteristics through psychological skills training, and also the fundamental skills necessary to play the position. What interests me about this project are the variety of strength and conditioning programs that enhance wide receivers' physical development, as well as the different mental training strategies that help wide receivers focus, reduce anxiety, and improve self-confidence. As a coach, I'm constantly developing my skills at teaching the skills necessary that a wide receiver needs to attain, and I do this through position-specific drills. First off, I chose this topic because I love football and I'm very passionate about coaching. In particular, I'm very passionate about the wide receiver position and all the skills that it takes to be good. The wide receiver position has really evolved with the evolution of football. With the spread offense, you could sometimes see 3, 4, 5 wide receivers taking the field. I wanted to continue my growth in my knowledge of the sport and the position. I wanted to research and learn so I can be the best coach I can every day for my athletes. As far as drills and skills go, I teach my kids hard work takes time. So I wanted to demonstrate to myself that if I put in the hard work and the time necessary, I could create a project that would benefit me in the long run. Within the strength and conditioning chapter, we learned a wide receiver needs to have the ability to jump high, sprint fast, use explosive strength, and use explosive power. Through the wide receiver curriculum guide, we learned how to develop speed, power, and velocity through proper periodization and the use of the overload principle when training wide receivers. Throughout the application section of this chapter, we learn that maximal speed can be developed through a wide receiver by training short sprints that last from 10 to 60 meters. We also learn that power and velocity can be trained through plyometrics and the use of resistance training. Within this wide receiver training curriculum guide, the wide receiver coach would learn how to properly periodize a strength and conditioning program while using the overload principle. Now, in short, periodization is how a wide receiver coach would progress their athletes through an extended strength and conditioning program. Two types of periodization are linear periodization and reverse linear periodization. Linear periodization is used when developing muscular strength, while reverse linear periodization is used when developing muscular endurance. Both are used as a wide receiver. Overload is adding resistance to the training regimen. So this can be done using hills or a parachute for speed training, or increasing the volume in proportion to an athlete's ability in the weight room. Within the wide receiver curriculum guide, we learned that to develop a wide receiver is a year-long approach. Within each year, there are 5 macro cycles. As you can see here, these are divided up into postseason, winter and spring strength and conditioning program, a spring camp, a preseason, and then finally a competitive season. Within each macro cycle, each 2 to 4 weeks would be its own mesocycle. And at the end of each macro cycle, there would be a microcycle, which is an active rest period. The first 4 macro cycles are a linear progression, where we will be building muscular strength within the wide receiver. The last macro cycle, the competitive season, would be a reverse linear periodization model, where we would be continuing the muscular strength built in the off season and continuing to build muscular endurance. The focus of Chapter 3 is psychological skills training. During the last few decades, coaches and athletes from a variety of sports have begun to realize the importance of the mental side of athletic performance. The greatest weapon of elite athletes is their mental strength, which is achieved by mental training. The 2 specific types of psychological skills training that will be discussed within this chapter are imagery and positive self-talk. Before a wide receiver coach has the ability to teach imagery, they must first know what imagery is. Imagery is a mental training technique that takes place in the mind's eye and does not include observable muscle movement. Within this wide receiver curriculum guide, a wide receiver coach would become familiar with the 5 types of imagery. The 5 types of imagery include cognitive specific, which is imagery of skills, cognitive general, which is imagery of strategies, routines, and game plans, motivational specific, which is imagery of goal achievement, motivational general arousal, which is imagery of stress, anxiety, and arousal, and motivational general of mastery, which is imaging of being self-confident, mentally tough, focused, and positive. Once a wide receiver coach understands the 5 types of imagery, they can then identify which type of imagery best fits their individual wide receivers through the Sport Imagery Questionnaire. The Sport Imagery Questionnaire is a set of questions for each type of imagery. Within that, they would rank it on a Likert scale between 1 and 7, 7 being strongly agree, 1 being strongly disagree. As the wide receiver coach scores each question, they can then identify the strengths and weaknesses when it comes to imagery of each individual wide receiver. When giving the Sport Imagery Questionnaire, a wide receiver coach would see some of these questions for each type of imagery. For cognitive specific, I can usually control how a skill looks in my head. For cognitive general, I make up new game plans or routines in my head. For motivational specific, I see myself doing my very best. For motivational general arousal, in my head, I imagine how calm I feel before I compete. For motivational general mastery, I imagine myself being confident in competition. Following imagery, the wide receiver curriculum guide moves on to its next psychological skills training method of self-talk. Self-talk has been defined as what people say to themselves either out loud or as a small voice inside their head. Many studies have shown a significant increase in self-confidence, confidence in skill, performance, and acquisition due to the rehearsed methods of self-talk. Research has shown that there are 3 types of self-talk: positive, negative, and instructional. Positive self-talk refers to statements that enhance and improve self-esteem and motivation and help athletes to concentrate more effectively on the current task and not on the mistakes made in the past. Negative self-talk are statements in the form of criticism that produce increased anxiety, lower self-efficacy, and lower performance. Instructional self-talk refers to words, phrases, or sentences that are designed to improve the performance of athletes by providing a focus on the technical aspects of training skills. When applying self-talk to their coaching practices, a wide receiver coach can do a few things to allow their wide receivers to use positive self-talk. Positive self-talk can be attained through goal statements, having a wide receiver revert back to their goal statements at the beginning of a practice or within the practice itself, applying those positive self-talk cues. Negative self-talk is something a wide receiver wants to stay away from. As a coach, we need to refrain from using negative statements. We need to teach wide receivers how to identify negative self-talk within their own playing practices. For instructional self-talk cues can be used. For example, holster, shoot, and drive can be used when teaching the blocking progression. Chapter 4 discusses different skills and drills for fundamental play of being a wide receiver. In particular, we focused on agility, blocking, and catching. These skills will first be broken down, and then an application section of drills that can be used to enhance these fundamentals within a wide receiver will be discussed. Within Chapter 4, we will begin with agility. Agility is the ability to efficiently and rapidly change direction or speed in response to a stimulus. Within this wide receiver curriculum guide, a wide receiver coach would learn and understand the 2 types of agility training. Agility can be trained using pre-planned change of direction drills and agility drills with the use of a stimulus. One example of a pre-planned change of direction drill would be the agility ladder. The agility ladder allows for wide receivers to increase agility skills without the use of a stimulus. There are a multitude of skills that the wide receiver would perform within the ladder. Coaching points would include focusing on keeping their feet close to the ladder, keeping their feet inside their box, directly under their hips, finish each repetition, start slow, increase speed with coordination, and always make sure a wide receiver is pumping their arms throughout every repetition. A wide receiver coach can always use pre-planned change of direction drills to enhance agility. However, research has shown that agility may be improved more efficiently through small-sided games. An example of a small-sided game that could be beneficial for any wide receiver's agility development would be one-on-one blocking. As the wide receiver goes to block the defensive player, he is forced to change directions as the defensive player changes their path to find the ball carrier. Just like speed training or resistance training, when training agility, a wide receiver coach would implement a training guide. The green squares within this training guide are a mild emphasis on agility training, yellow squares represent a moderate emphasis, and red squares represent a major emphasis in agility training. As you can see, as the wide receiver gets closer to the competitive season, towards the end of the calendar year, the wide receiver coach would more emphasize agility within their training. Following agility, the wide receiver curriculum guide moves on to the next skill that is very important for any wide receiver to attain, and that is the skill of blocking. To effectively execute the stock block, a wide receiver needs to have quality body alignment. A wide receiver coach would emphasize low center of gravity, making sure that they are lower than the defense. A strong foundation is key to ensure balance. The wide receiver blocking position mimics a squat position that you would find in the weight room. Once a wide receiver coach has deemed that their wide receivers have quality body alignment, they are ready to move on to the 4 phases of the block. The 4 phases of the block include the acceleration phase, holster, shoot, and drive phases. Starting in a quality wide receiver stance, a good block starts with the efficient acceleration phase. This involves the wide receiver sprinting off the line of scrimmage. If a wide receiver does not sprint off the line of scrimmage, that is a big key to the defensive players that it is a run play. To teach the last 3 phases of the stock block, a wide receiver coach may want to implement a sound blocking drill. Within this drill, the coach can call out different commands. On each command, a wide receiver would get into the position of that phase of the block. For example, after the acceleration phase, the coach would call out holster. The wide receivers would get in the squat position, hands by their hips, moving their feet, eyes on the chest plate of the defensive player. On the second command, shoot, a wide receiver would then shoot their hands towards the chest plate of the defensive player. On the third command, the defensive player would then begin zigzagging left and right. The wide receiver would then continue moving their feet to ensure that they are keeping their body in between the offensive running player and the defensive player. In this section of the wide receiver curriculum guide, we will focus on catching. Catching the ball consistently is a vital part of becoming a great wide receiver. Catching the ball requires 2 components: temporal execution of the catch and spatial execution of the catch. Both can lead to a miss. Spatial execution is bringing your hands to the ball. Temporal execution is grasping the ball when it hits your hands. Multiple repetitions of the skill have been shown to increase these characteristics. Because spatial and temporal execution of the catch is improved through multiple repetitions of catching, a wide receiver coach would implement a variety of catching drills within each practice session. A wide receiver coach can simply have their wide receivers play catch back and forth, focusing on looking the ball into their hands, grasping the ball, and getting their hands in the correct placement. A wide receiver coach could also perform the run at me drill, which is a simple drill where the wide receiver runs directly at the coach in a variety of different ways, whether that be at a 45 or 90-degree angle, or the wide receiver coach places the ball behind the wide receiver or in front of the wide receiver. The wide receiver would have to change directions or manipulate where they put their hands in order to secure the catch. Chapter 5 of the Wide Receiver Curriculum Guide outlines tests and assessments for any wide receiver coach to implement. Within this is strength and conditioning, evaluation of mental preparation skills, and assessing skills and drills. In order for a wide receiver coach to understand the gains that are taking place during a strength and conditioning program, they would implement the 40-yard dash and the vertical jump. The 40-yard dash could be used to test the speed of an athlete. The vertical jump could be used to test the muscular power of an athlete. In order to record and analyze this data, they would want to keep track of it on a strength and conditioning assessment sheet, which has pre- and post-test information for both the 40-yard dash and the vertical jump. Evaluating mental preparation can take place in the form of goals. A wide receiver coach can have their wide receivers fill out goals on a weekly or daily basis to better understand when they are using positive self-talk. An observational checklist can be used to understand which type of PST is being used, either imagery or self-talk, the context in which it took place, and the place in which it happened. To understand which type of imagery a wide receiver uses most or needs to work on most, a wide receiver coach can implement the Sport Imagery Questionnaire. This would outline the strengths and weaknesses of a wide receiver when it comes to imagery. Assessing agility, blocking, and catching can both be done through formative and summative assessments. An example of a summative assessment would be pre-planned change of direction agility tests, where a wide receiver coach would gather data on the 20-yard shuttle or the L drill. Assessing agility with a stimuli or assessing blocking will both be formative in a sense that the wide receiver coach would use a 4-point rubric. As a wide receiver progresses in their skills, they may also progress on the rubric demonstrating growth. Assessing catching is done through verbal feedback. As a wide receiver catches footballs, the wide receiver coach would give them verbal feedback on their temporal or spatial characteristics of each catch. Chapter 6 is all about results and recommendations. What a wide receiver coach would do with this data. This data needs to be collected and placed in either assessment spreadsheet or in a notebook. They should label each section strength and conditioning, mental preparation, and drills and skills. This can be used to identify growth throughout a given year or used to identify growth throughout a high school career. Thank you for watching my presentation on the Wide Receiver Curriculum Guide. Hopefully, you feel very prepared to coach your receivers through mental preparation, strength and conditioning, and drills and skills. With this information, I am sure that you will have elite wide receivers in no time.